Welcome r/Prorevenge. Revenge on evil landlord. When I was in university, I'd heard stories about horrible landlords of student housing, but hadn't experienced it myself. Until third year, when it felt like we got 3 years worth of shitty landlords all in one go. It began when I heard noises in the wall behind my bed at night. I brushed it off for a while, until I realized that it was an animal in the wall. I told the landlords the next day, and they immediately played dumb, acting as if I was stupid in front of my housemates for suggesting that something could fit inside of a wall. That was the first alarm bell. Why immediately try to embarrass me into dropping it? After explaining that I know what a cavity wall is, she asked if we'd seen anything in the kitchen. Oddly specific. We didn't think about it until later. From then on her husband dealt with us. We weren't aware that he was a landlord too. A little time passes, still nothing done about the noise in my wall. Not that it was a surprise. I'd worked out by then that it was probably something like a mouse, and that it could run through the terrace of houses, as long as it didn't chew its way through my wall or die in there. I put the whole thing on the back burner. Until we were all sat in the sitting room, and heard a thud in the kitchen. Then squeaking. There was a giant rat in our kitchen. The rat disappeared into a hole in the completely crumbling kitchen wall, and the landlord claimed that we made it up and that they'd never had a rodent problem. I contacted the previous tenants through Facebooking names I found on letters for them that had been posted to us by mistake. The property had had a rat problem for the last 3 years before we moved in at least. I set a rat trap and caught one, took photos, and sent them to the landlord to tell him to sort the problem out. He told us that, because there was a line in our contract about the landlord not paying for pest control, the contract specified wasps' nests etc. We didn't even think about rats when we signed it, that we'd have to pay the hundreds of pounds to fix it. He'd knowingly written that into our contract, so he wouldn't have to pay out, instead of fixing the kitchen wall and the exterior wall where the rats were getting in. To cut the rest of the setting the scene part of the story short, we called the council, who sent a pest control team. While on their visit, one of the men took my housemate to one side and told her that a landlord is evil and he is known for getting nasty. They told him that it wasn't our fault that there were rats, it was his, and he screamed in my face until he was bright red about how I was a terrible person and was trying to take him down for no reason. One of my housemates had to leave because she was scared. I wasn't. We were in a room full of men who were backing us up, making himself look worse for screaming in my face like that. I met and was 22 at the time, about half his size. He tried to sue us for slander. It isn't slander if it's true, so swing and a miss. Now, for the revenge. It was written into our contract that we had to be notified 24 hours in advance if anyone needed access to the house, which included house viewings. I began my mission: stop any other students from getting stuck in this hellhole. The house was being shown by agents, so it made it fairly easy. I left the rat traps in prominent places, casually explaining why we needed them if asked, and if I felt I was being too subtle, making a fake show of "oh gosh, please ignore the rat traps." The landlord said he'd fix the kitchen wall where they get in, but hasn't gotten around to it, so we have to catch them. I was honest about the mold problem in the bathroom when I found out they were planning on increasing the rent by £100 a month. I made a point of saying something like, well, it's just about worth the rent I was paying. I made sure to say his name so they wouldn't get away with using his wife's name as a front, while his reputation for aggression stayed hidden. The agents never said anything to me directly, and because we had to be notified, I could always make sure I was home when there was a viewing. My housemates fully supported my revenge, but I was the woman of action in the house. When I'm sure I'm in the right, I will do what's necessary to make things right. That was until they tried to turn up unannounced one day, not even knocking, just unlocked our front door and walked in. Luckily I was in the house and kicked them out for not informing us, and told them that they were in breach of our contract. If the shitty landlord could use it to beat us with, two can play at that game. No new tenants had signed for the house by the time we were free of that hellhole. It's been 2 years now though, so I have no idea what happened to the rat house. not in every country, and I may get downvoted again for daring to suggest that rules and laws differ from country to country, but at least here, Finland, there's no reason that the landlord could enter alone without notice. And non-emergency visits must have been notified 2 weeks prior. Non-emergency maintenance can be as low as 24 hours before visit, but again, not just the landlord, they must be accompanied by the actual maintenance crew. There's an edge case here that I don't know how it would work. What if the landlord is working as the maintenance? I don't know how legal or possible that is, and I've never even heard of it happening, so I can't comment on that. Other than those, the landlord has no legal way to enter the house. Well, they can of course enter anytime the tenant allows, which, with the better landlords is sometimes often, and is not a problem. Yep. If my landlord ever entered my apartment without my permission, I'd be calling the police first, then the Tenant Protection Board. This is why I'll never rent from a private landlord and live in a private residence. So many homeowners think they can walk right into the part they rent out because they own the entire house. No. Doesn't work that way. This is why I'll only rent from a reputable apartment complex. When my last apartment was being showed to prospective tenants, they'd slip a written form under my door to notify me the exact date it was being shown. If I didn't sign the form and return it to the rental office, they'd call me to make absolutely sure that I saw the form. They didn't have to, but since there was a week I was out of the country, I appreciate the gesture. It is illegal, and not all landlords abide by it. My mom and I lived in an apartment who had such a landlord. This was in the Chicago suburbs. Aside from the fact that he refused to fix the AC during the hottest summer in Chicago history where hundreds of people were dying, he thought that 85 degrees inside versus the 110 outside was reasonable. Or the fridge, where we couldn't keep milk for longer than 2 days because it would spoil, and the rancid smell that came from the fridge even without anything in it. He would walk into our apartment and announced. After being warned several times about this, the final straw was when I was home from school early. I'd just gotten dressed from taking a shower when I heard a key in the back door and heard it open. Thinking it was my mom, I walked out and saw the landlord. He just waltzed right in saying he was going to look at the AC or some other bullshit excuse to spy on us, even though it was spring and we weren't using the AC. I was 13 and home alone. My mom broke the lease and we were gone a month later. I had a landlord keep doing that, even though I kept warning her that it's illegal, and making the agent showing the condo reschedule, which only made the agent angry at my landlord. I had bought a house, was in the process of moving, and would have graciously let them show the condo had she followed the rules. I would take the key box off the front door, unless I knew they were showing it, which led to calls from my landlord, or even the showing agent, asking me to unlock the door when I was at work. They'd call and ring the doorbell at 8 AM on the weekend, when I want to sleep in, so I'd just ignore them. And my landlord would get angry with me about lost sales and I'd have to remind her, again, I need 24-hour notice. She was a real estate agent too, she knew better. Finally, the day we moved everything out, I was in my grungiest clothes and was planning on picking up all the extra trash and cardboard and heading to my new home. It was the last day we were in the condo, and she scheduled someone with no notice. I just left the key on the counter and left, leaving a mess in the main room. She tried to withhold the cleanup fees from my deposit, but I asked for an itemized list of costs, and when 30 days passed with no list, I sent her a certified letter letting her know I want the full amount or I will ask for 2x in small claims court, and included a copy of the renter's law that stipulated it. She paid it in full, and emailed me how I was a terrible person. I rented a place I called the hovel that had rats. I told the landlord about it, as if he didn't know already, who nailed some pieces of metal over the outside gaps in the siding. The thing was, there was a 1-foot gap between the outside walls and the ground, so you could actually see under the house from all sides. The rats were coming up into the house inside the walls, and running around the kitchen and attic. After complaining a few times and getting nowhere, and after vacuuming the 1-inch thick layer of rat droppings out of the attic, because it grossed me out to be living under a ceiling of shit, I decided to try a different approach. I was on good terms with the landlord. The next time he came by I thanked him for his efforts to get rid of the rats and wondered what else we could try that might possibly work. In my most innocent and concerned voice I said, there must be people who have dealt with this sort of issue who would know what to do. I bet the health department might be able to give us some advice. The landlord startled and quickly assured me he knew what to do and would take care of it. He had a skirt built around the hovel and fixed the problem. I couldn't stop laughing while reading this because this ironically just happened to me this past year in my third year of college. My landlord was an absolute asshole and would never answer his phone, but always made sure to text us when we had a water bill due. He would never give us notice before coming to the house or anything, and he was nasty to us. One day, I saw 2 roaches in the kitchen and killed them with bug spray, but called my landlord repeatedly and told him someone needs to come spray before we get an infestation. And I'm also allergic to roaches. He said he sent someone to spray, but it never got done because no one came over and they were still in the house. So I took it upon myself to leave raid everywhere in the house. When they did showings too, took them 4 months to find new tenants, and he was trying to sell the house, but couldn't find anyone who wanted to buy that shithole place either.